Let's talk now to Brady Henderson of ESPN. Good friend of the program, at Brady Henderson on Twitter. Go give him a follow. Brady, thank you for jumping through all those hoops for us. We greatly appreciate it. What did you make of the Seahawks draft? Addressing D tackle right out of the gate, I'm sure was welcome sight for Seahawks fans. Outside of that pick, or I guess including that pick, what did you make of what the Seahawks did over the weekend?
First of all, thanks for having me. Sorry about the technical difficulties I had there, but I think in every draft, most fans would want them to address the biggest need with the first pick, and a lot of times, sometimes it works out and the board falls that way. Sometimes teams reach and they will value filling the need more than taking the best player available. But I think the Seahawks have learned some lessons over the years in doing that can get you in trouble, and they weren't going to do that. I think this was a draft where they were very intent on taking the best player available. And just when you look at, where they picked guys, if you look at where those guys were generally projected to go, for the most part, they took guys, they got good value, and they took guys generally where they were projected to go. And I think the Tyrese Knight pick in the fourth round was probably one example where maybe they took a guy earlier than he was projected to go. I think he was probably more of a fifth round guy. He was certainly a day three guy. Maybe you took him around early, but for the most part, you took guys, you got good value, and you took guys generally around the spot where they were projected to go, if not later. And so the Byron Murphy pick was, I think, a good example of that. He was, in their opinion, the best defensive player in the draft. Now, they didn't have Leatu Latu on their board because of his neck issue.
Right.
So when he went one pick before, they had their pick of the best defensive player in the draft in their mind. And so they got him. I think there was a scenario where they could have drafted an offensive lineman there if J.C. Latham had fallen to them. And if Byron Murphy was gone, I think they would have taken Latham. But it's Byron Murphy, and I think in other people's board might have been the best defensive player in this draft too, and so he did pretty well to get him there at 16.
Now, Brady, I don't get to cover the team the way that you do, so all I've learned, we know McDonald has a great track record defensively and what he did at Baltimore. So aside from that, all I've learned is he's really into interior decorating. Outside of that, what has Brady Henderson learned about Mike McDonald, even though it's a very early time in the tenure, and I know that the camp stuff hasn't really happened. What have you learned about him so far since he got to Seattle?
Yeah, I think he's a really smart guy. And every time you talk, I've asked that question to people around the building, and the one thing you hear is he's a really smart guy, just kind of a brilliant football mind. I think that he is getting used to being in that kind of spotlight. And you mentioned the interior decorating at the VMAC. He was asked about that at one point, on day 3 when he and Schneider were doing their press conference, and he kind of had to work through the answer a little bit. And look, I think anybody is going to seem a little less comfortable in that situation than Pete Carroll would, because as we know, we all heard Pete Carroll for 14 years. Like, the guy could talk his way out of anything, and he could give a smooth answer to any question, even if the answer didn't have all that much substance to it. He would just be smooth about it. And I think that McDonald is still getting comfortable being in that spotlight. And it's such a huge leap when you think about, like, as a coordinator, you talk to reporters once a week during the season, maybe a couple times during the off season. And so I just don't think he is totally comfortable being in that role and being in a situation where, the cameras are on him and where he's asked to, ask kind of questions about maybe some tricky topics like that. But smart guy, I think he's going to be a good head coach, but there's going to be some kind of comfort that he's got to gain being in that situation.
Yeah, Dirt, I feel like all the stuff I've seen so far is a lot of John Schneider, which John Schneider, welcome to the spotlight even more than you were. And then, they had a draft video and Schneider was talking and he's amped. And then they go to McDonald and he's like, yeah, Seahawks fans, follow. And I'm like, that guy needs a little media training.
Did you expect that when, because you had that story, I think first, Brady, about the hallway murals and the paintings and all that caused quite a dust up. Did you think that was going to be the case as that was going down and you were reporting that?
Yeah, when I heard it, it sounded like something that, some fans might get a little bit a little sideways over, but I think it's important to realize the full context of that. Some people took that to mean that Mike McDonald, took a brush and was scrubbing every single Pete Carroll fingerprint from the building. I mean, that's not true at all. Really, we're talking about one main hallway that goes from like their locker room to the main meeting room, and it had all these blown up pictures of, the Carroll era players and some of the signature moments of the Carroll era. And there's probably, over a dozen photos that on that big hallway. And then in between the photos, there's a little lining with Pete Carroll slogans. And so, look, you weren't going to keep the basketball hoop. I think taking the basketball hoop down was a no-brainer, just because you couldn't have McDonald there address the team every day with this reminder of Pete Carroll hanging over his head. I was a little less certain about the pictures, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Like, you've got to create some space to create your own history like that. And it's not like you're taking every photo down of every former player. I mean, if you take a right at the end of that same hallway, it's all their Ring of Honor players. There's other framed photos of more recent, Pete Carroll era players. And so it's really just that one wall we're talking about. And I think the idea there was they don't want to live in the past, and they want to create some space to create their own signature moments and their own history like that. And there's going to be some guys from, this team that are going to be up on that wall eventually.
Yeah. I'm curious, the quarterback position. We know Geno's there. We got Sam Howell now, and they've been very complimentary of Sam Howell. Is this a John Schneider, Mike McDonald come in, revamp the defense, hopefully bolster the offensive line through the draft? A.J. Barner's an interesting pick in the 4th round, given, Noah Fant and his history, Farrell Brown, et cetera. Maybe Barner's going to be a sneaky good pickup for him, especially in run blocking. Is this a let's make the playoffs, be kind of middle of the road type situation, figure out our quarterback down the road? Or do you get a real sense that they really believe that Geno can take them to the next level? And if not, they maybe have an inner belief that Sam Howell can get past his interception problem a year ago?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the jury is very much out within the organization on what Geno is and how good he can be and whether he can take them to the next level. I mean, meaning whether he can get them into the playoffs and win a playoff game, let alone go on a deep playoff run. I think there's very much a question mark, and that's evident just in the way that you hear the organization talk about him. And, the latest example was after the draft. Of course, they didn't take a quarterback again. And John Schneider was asked about, I think the question was, what is your long-term plan at quarterback? Now, he very much blanched at the question or the wording of the question, and he couldn't believe that the reporter asked it, or at least, worded it that way. But then he went on to talk about how big of a deal the Sam Howell trade was, and he mentioned Geno in there, but really his answer was, it was more like, well, I don't think you realize, how big of an investment we made or how significant it was to pick up Sam Howell. And he said, Sam Howell's a big part of our future. That was a quote, big part of our future. Now, I think it's interesting that he talked way more about Howell there than he did about Geno. It wasn't like, yeah, Geno's our guy, and that's obvious. It was, yeah, we've got Geno, and then we made this big trade for Sam Howell, who's got 2 years left on his quarterback. That's kind of I think you don't have to read too hard between the lines there with that comment and with other comments that he's made to know that, yeah, John Schneider's very skeptical about Geno Smith, and he's really excited to see what they've got in Sam Howell. And he made the point several times about how Howell is 23 years old and has 18 starts, and some of the guys in this draft are older than that, So the point there is that there's plenty of upside there. Yeah, he threw a lot of interceptions last season, and that's got to be it's not like they think of him as a surefire long-term guy. But, Schneider, I think it's important to note that Schneider came from Green Bay when Brett Favre was there. And he made this interesting comment at the owners' meetings a month or so ago where he talked about how he was around a young Brett Favre who threw a lot of interceptions in Green Bay and obviously turned out really well. Now, Brett Favre continued to throw interceptions throughout his career. It wasn't like that was a young problem, but I think his point was that you can't really judge a guy based on, some struggles he has early on. And I think they just see a lot of upside in Sam Howell. And I think, the other comment he made that's really instructive going forward is he said, I love the way Sam play. Love the way those guys play, meaning Sam and Brett Favre. I don't think you would ever hear Pete Carroll say, I love the way that guy plays when you're talking about a quarterback who threw, 20-plus interceptions a year ago. I think I think Schneider is going to be a lot more willing than Pete Carroll was to put up with some turnovers with young quarterbacks, to kind of have that gunslinger type guy who's, going to really jam the ball in there and really be aggressive. I don't think this is a trade they would have made necessarily if Pete Carroll was here, but Schneider is running the show, and I think he's going to be more willing to get quarterbacks who are that kind of gunslinger type.
Interesting. That's great stuff on the quarterback position.
I have one more on the positional needs of Seattle. I'm curious how you view their linebacker spot. That was once a beloved, coveted spot where everybody in Seattle, I think, just looked at it and said, oh, we're jealous of what they have in Seattle with that Legion of Boom stuff. And I know that was a while ago, but how we feel about what they are at linebacker right now.
Yeah, they Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker are going to be their starters. Both those guys are on one-year deals, but they did move pretty aggressively in free agency to sign those guys. Those weren't like 1 year minimum salary, $1 or $2 deals that you see teams sign as a quote-unquote veteran hedge to where they really think they're going to get a guy in the draft, but just in case they don't, you sign a guy to a cheap deal. Those were $4 and like $7 million deals, something in that neighborhood. That told me that they viewed this draft as not really being all that strong in terms of inside linebackers, and we saw that. Now, there wasn't a single one that went in the first round. I think maybe only a couple, one or two over the first 2 rounds, and one was Edgerrin Cooper, who went in the second round, I believe, to Green Bay. So I think they anticipated not being in a good position to find a starting inside linebacker in this draft, and really thought that it was going to be a day 3 pick. So Tyrese Knight, I mentioned earlier, I know there was, generally he was projected to go a little bit later than what they thought. I talked to a scout from another team who said he liked Knight, but thought that was a little bit early for him. I kind of wonder if they maybe had a 5th round grade on him just based on some things I've heard. So they maybe had to reach a little bit for him, but I know that the coaches loved him. I know they had kind of a cluster of inside linebackers that they were looking at, and this was the guy that the coaches really liked. So not going to start right away, but it's going to play special teams, going to be a backup, and I do think it's possible, not likely, but possible, maybe, a 10% chance that they bring Jamal Adams back, and if so, that would be to be a backup at weak side linebacker and to be kind of a rotational guy who would give you some pass rushing as well.
Interesting fit after the way the season ended last year. Well, Brady, we always enjoy the time, man, and this was a fun one today. We mainly just wanted to have you on YouTube so our audience could get a look at your boat, and they have been debating your boat for the entire interview. So,
what are the questions? What's the debate
everybody's
about?
just kind of saying, like, wait, is Brady calling from a boat? It's like, well, is this your first Brady interview that you've heard? Because every interview we ask him about his boat. So we just wanted to get a look at that. The skipper hat in the background looks great. People are making Gilligan's Island jokes, so we're quite enjoying it.
Yeah, Brady, you're familiar with the boat. You've talked about it. What is it like for those of... I've always kicked around. I get these Redfin updates every day, and sometimes they send me houses I don't look at. Some of those are boat houses. What is it like to live on a boat?
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, especially coming up on this time of the year where you really endure the winters and then you enjoy the spring and summer. So it's a yacht. It's not technically a houseboat, it's a yacht, but I never say yacht because that makes it sound way fancier than it really is. But 49 feet. It's kind of built in some ways like a houseboat, like it's a yacht that's built to live aboard. So now is the time we really start enjoying it when the weather gets nicer like this.
Is the Wi-Fi good?
It's good enough. Yeah, I was testing it a little bit earlier because the link to the video stream wouldn't load, but. Yeah, Wi-Fi is good. The one downside is laundry.
Yeah.
I haven't had an on-site laundry, but I got a washer-dryer combo, and I'm getting it installed here in the next couple of days, so that's going to be a game changer for me.
Look at that. Upgrade season for Brady Henderson,
yacht.
Dude. For the yacht. My apologies for the yacht.
You've been calling it a boat. It's a yacht.
It's a yacht. We got to learn that there. Brady Henderson, go give him a follow on Twitter at Brady Henderson. He's one of the best out there covering the Seahawks. He caused quite the kerfuffle with his Murals story a couple of weeks ago. Great stuff on the NFL draft. Great to get a look at the yacht, Brady. Thanks for the time, man. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
We'll see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Brady Henderson. Yeah, the comments started popping up immediately. Is he calling from a boat?
He lives on a yacht.
He lives on a yacht. He's living that yacht life.
Should have asked, has it always been the dream, or is it something that developed late in his life? He learned how to Sail?
Not really.
I don't navigate. I don't know what you say with it. Is it? I think it's sail. And then he grew a passion to the point where he's like, why would I rent an apartment when I could live on a yacht?
Dude, winters on a boat in Seattle would be brutal. But summers on a boat in Seattle, amazing. You got to live. It's like a seasonal thing. You got to go somewhere else for
You could just move,
October through May, and then move back onto the boat.
It's not like he couldn't go south with the yacht.
This is true.
There's probably, channels you can take to get down to Southern California.
You'll find another dock somewhere. All right, Brady Henderson, good stuff.